Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, January the 14th, 12:31 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. And as usual, if you're here live with us, you have a priority to suggest topics of your interest to be discussed live. Just note that we cannot go too much into details whenever you have a specific case because we're not supposed to have consultations live and consultations without charging a fee as per the Brazilian Bar Association. But anyhow, for any matter, for any topic, I can surely elaborate on general guidelines about the topic. All right. So if you're here with us, let me know you are here live, and I'm sure we're going to have some of our usual friends participating with us. Also, let me know if you can hear me well. Okay, if you can hear me well, I want to make sure everything is working as it should. I have a kind of a portable setup today, so if you can send me some feedback and let me know that you guys can hear me well, that would be appreciated. And we have the first participation here is General Principal. Welcome, General Principal. Boa tarde, Mr. Oliveira. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you as well. Glad to see you here, General. And let me know if you guys can hear me well. All right. So in the meantime, I believe you are warming up for questions, for participations, maybe sharing some stuff. In the meantime, I've been to Florianopolis, right? Like we have a lot of activity in Florianopolis, particularly from digital nomads and real estate investors, right? Florianopolis is such a nice destination. It is an island, by the coast of Santa Catarina, and there is actually, a connection from the continent to the island. And, maybe because of the island geography, Florianopolis is way safer than the average capital in Brazil, right? So if someone is concerned about safety in Brazil, Florianopolis will be typically a main option, all right? Real estate, there are some, really, really amazing pieces of real estate. There is one particular neighborhood that I visited this time, like I'm aware of the neighborhood, but this time I spent more time over there. The name of this neighborhood is Jurerê Internacional. I'm going to type over here Jurerê Internacional, and the locals, they call it like, the Brazilian, like the Brazilian Beverly Hills, right? And for a good reason, like, I mean, the properties over there, they are of a really high standard. And, like I was thinking another day, I was watching a documentary about the Safra family, right? Like the bankers. And they used to live like in Monaco, right? And I could see the footage of those places, and I said, why would someone want to live in Monaco or anywhere else in Europe if they could live in Jurerê International, right? Like, I mean, you see pretty much everything is so much better in Florianopolis than it would be in Europe in general, right? Like, I mean, of course, there are different destinations in Europe, but that was my thought. I said, why would a billionaire want to settle in Monaco instead of Florianopolis, right? Like that was a thought that I had. Aaron, good to see you here. Aaron is asking, what are your thoughts on the failed PCC prosecution and the judges wanting even higher salaries now, right? So the PCC that Aaron is mentioning over here is The name is Primeiro Comando da Capital, and it's a criminal organization, right? Like, so in Brazil, there are different criminal organizations, and they're pretty well organized, if you will, right? Like, I mean, typically with a management structure, presence in different states, and so on. And unfortunately, during the like the last, I would say the last 10 or 20 years, these organizations, they've been growing over time. They try to, stay out of the everyday citizen path, right? Like, so they operate more like in the shadows, particularly with drug trafficking, this type of stuff. But what's going on right now is that there is an effort by politicians, the government to kind of reduce the power of such organizations. And from my perspective, Aaron, there is like a dispute among these different parties, right? Like, I mean, different parties, different ideologies of on how to tackle the challenge. And it is very unfortunate because the end goal is pretty much the same, right? Like, I mean, to stop those organizations from growing and expanding. But just like in the United States, there is a lot of polarization in Brazil as we speak. So everything is a matter of disagreement. Okay, even to fight organized crime, you're gonna see this noise. Like the left side of the aisle, fighting with the right side, instead of those two parties or two groups of people collaborating towards a common goal, right? So that's what I see, and that's what's going on now. On the judges, that's something that I spoke already. I think like the way that the judiciary operates in Brazil is a major reason. Is a major reason for precluding Brazil from being even more developed and even more economically advanced, right? For those of you who don't know, like Brazil is going to be positioned consistently among the 12 most or the 12 richest countries in the world in terms of production, of gross production. So Brazil is certainly a super heavyweight, right? It's not just a heavyweight, it's a super heavyweight. Actually, it's not uncommon for Brazil to be a top 10, sometimes a top 9, right? So there are actually, few countries that are more productive than Brazil, if you will, right? So there is a lot of potential, but unfortunately, the judiciary, the judiciary doesn't keep tab on the behavior of judges when it comes to compensation, right? Because if you think it is true, like, only the judges are capable of adjudicating what should be a ceiling for how much a judge would make. And traditionally, unfortunately, there has been a culture of overcompensating Brazilian judges. So it's not uncommon, believe it or not, for a judge in Brazil to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And sometimes you're going to see some specific positions, and not just in the judiciary, but other areas of the government, making $200,000, $300,000 a year, 400,000, and on top of a huge salary, they are going to get all types of benefits that you can think of. So it's not just the money that they are taking; they are also being paid like for private, schools for their children. They're getting an additional amount to be able to pay for housing. It is just ridiculous, right? And I think that this position by the judiciary is going to send the wrong message. Is going to send the wrong message to everyone else that Brazil is a country of privilege, in which some people are going to live extremely well, while other people are going to live on minimum wage, right? That's very unfortunate. Thank you for asking this question because that's something really, really, concerning to me, Aaron. Okay. And just like you said, I'm not even addressing even higher salaries, right? Like I'm just addressing what we have as of today. It's just like, unacceptable. And unfortunately, culturally, it is something rooted in our culture, right? It's not something that people say, you know what, like, I mean, we're really doing something bad. I don't think there is even awareness, right, by the judges, by the judiciary of how outlandish this reality is, right? Like, again, I'm going to repeat, pretty common for Brazilian judges to have salaries like 100,000 US dollars. And I'm talking about dollars, I'm not talking Brazilian reais, right? 100,000 US dollars, sometimes even a couple of 100,000 US dollars. When you factor in all the types of earnings that they are gonna, encompass, and there is always something new that they're gonna come up with to, add even more to the pile. Okay, so and naturally, it's not like every single judge. I think if you're starting as a judge, maybe you're gonna make I don't know 6,000-7,000 dollars to start with, but even the $6,000-7,000, if you think about it. There are a lot of people living on minimum wage in Brazil. Minimum wage is like 16, 1,700 reais, right? Like, so we're talking about 300, $400 a month. And why would someone, receive 300 to $400 a month while someone else is going to be paid $6,000, right, at the beginning of their career, right? Like they're going to be, as they, advance in the judicial career, like within the judiciary, right? We're not talking about attorneys, we're talking about the judges. Just like as addressed by Aaron, they're going to make even more money, right? It's just like, outlandish. Very interesting point, Aaron. Kitwell. Oi, meu irmão, posso te ouvir bem? So good to see you, Keith. Thank you for confirming. I did see your message, and that's why I continue. I continue to talk. All right, we have Matt Gaines. Good to see you, Matt. Feliz Ano Novo, Dr. Oliveira. Feliz Ano Novo, Matt. Feliz Ano Novo, Adrian. Question for Matt. What is the process and timeline for obtaining a driver license once a person arrives in Brazil on a retirement or marriage visa? All right, obtaining a driver license. So, Matt, for a driver license, right, as long as you have a valid US driver license, you're going to be able to apply for a Brazilian driver license based on your foreign driver license, right? So let's assume you have a driver license from Texas, and is gonna be, I don't know, renewable a couple of years down the line, meaning that it's current and good. So you could apply. Let's say if you move it to, I don't know, Santa Catarina or Rio Grande do Sul, then you're gonna apply naturally with the state authority of the state in which you're going to reside. So let's say if you're gonna live in Santa Catarina, you're gonna work with the Santa Catarina DMV, right? We don't say DMV in Brazil, it's just like, to explain the concept. Actually, in most of the states in Brazil, we call it Detran. I'm gonna write over here in the chat window, Detran, right? So that's how we call the DMV in Brazil. Now, a problem that I see, very often, Matt, is that whenever you're gonna apply, guess what? Both the department and the personnel in that department, they are not used to work with foreign citizens. So chances are, whenever you're gonna deal with the DMV from Santa Catarina, right? In just a random example, the person who's going to be assisting you, like there is I don't know, I would guess like a 95% chance this person never handled a foreign citizen, right? And many times, instead of asking for assistance to their boss, they're going to try to learn on the fly. And as a result, you're going to receive incorrect directions, and there will be a need for multiple attempts until you break through. You break through this friction, okay? And that's very consistent. That happens in Rio de Janeiro, that happens in São Paulo, that happens in pretty much every single state. And I also see this kind of friction happening in different aspects of the life of a foreign citizen in Brazil. Like Brazilians, they don't, I don't know why, like they don't really like to say that they don't know something, right? So instead of saying, listen, I don't know, I have no clue about what I'm doing over here, they're gonna try to make something up or learn on the fly, right? And you're gonna be the guinea pig that they're gonna be using for their learning, right? So one tip over here is that once you start on this journey, something that you could do, if you're handling this process, like once you are attending an appointment at the Brazilian DMV, is to ask to talk to a supervisor very nicely, right? Like you don't want to antagonize folks over there because, if you antagonize one, like another could also say, that's just like, an annoying gringo. And then instead of helping, they're going to make your life even more miserable, right? But ask very nicely if you could talk to their supervisor, and then chances are the supervisor will have handled a foreign citizen in the past. Okay, so that would be one of my recommendations. We also handle driver licenses for current clients, right? Like if you just not talking about you in particular, Matt, but if someone just comes to our office, or if they email, or if they call us and they say, listen, do you help with driver licenses? We're going to say, no, we do not, right? Because it's so much aggravation for so little compensation that we don't want to touch that. Now, if you are a client, let's say if you have used our services for something like, the retirement visa in Brazil, or the marriage-based permanent residency, or the real estate investor visa, then it's a different story, right? Then we understand that in a long-term relationship between the firm and the client, we may need to handle stuff like the driver license, right? But if someone comes just for the driver license alone, we're not going to offer for sure. Just highlighting, how cumbersome it is. But listen, it is doable, and all the clients that work with us, eventually they are going to get there. All right, Matt. I hope I'm not, sounding too pessimistic over here. General principle. All right, Don, I'm just trying to fix my AC over here. Remember, we are in Brazil. We are not in the North Hemisphere, right? All right. So going back to general principle, do you know if it is possible to owe taxes, do business in Brazil without becoming a tax resident, renting real estate? Yes, that's actually very common. Like, I mean, non-residents, they also owe taxes in Brazil, right? So let's think about, this scenario. Let's say you get the digital nomad visa, and that you're staying in Brazil for up to 183 days in any given moving 12-month bracket, right? It's not calendar year, it's a moving 12-month bracket. And if you're staying up to 183 days, you're most probably not becoming a tax resident, right? However, if you have a property and you're renting out, if you're leasing this property to tenants, you're making money in Brazil, and naturally you're gonna pay taxes, right? It's not just because you are not a tax resident that you're not gonna pay any taxes. So yes, the answer, general principle, it is positive. You may have to pay taxes even though you are not a tax resident in Brazil. Okay, now the do business is more settled. There is a bunch of different, sub scenarios that we could have. But just to articulate one concept, okay, if you are a non-resident, and now I'm not talking about tax, okay, I'm talking about legal residency. If you are not a permanent resident, you cannot be the legal representative for a company. Okay, you can own the shares, you can open a new entity, right? No concerns. Even with just the tourist visa, you can open a company, but you need to hire a legal resident to be the representative for your entity. Okay, and that's not tax related. That's more about being someone who's living in Brazil on a permanent basis or not. Brazil is super concerned about people, like opening a business, incurring debt, labor obligations and tax obligations, and flying away without paying their debt and obligations, right? So the idea here is that if you keep a a permanent resident as the legal representative, then you have someone on the hook for all of those obligations, right? Very different than so many other countries in which they would never get to that point of demand, right? Like, I mean, it's really demanding. I'm familiar with other countries, like India, naturally United States, right? Other countries in Europe, and this requirement that you have a legal resident to be the legal representative of your entity is very unusual. Okay, but that's how it works in Brazil, and they typically enforce that well. Sometimes they mess up whenever they're reading their book of requirements, but most of the time they understand that unless you have a legal permanent resident to become the representative for your entity, they are not going to allow you to open a business in Brazil. All right. Flying Prince, yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you for letting me know, Flying Prince. Your audio is great, but I wish we were available for a paid consultation today in respect to the pre and post digital nomad visa. I'm done with document stamping, right? Pre and post digital nomad visa. Listen, Flying Prince, last time I took a look at my schedule. The next available appointments, they were for next week, all right? And if you go to our calendar and you see like senior attorney, I take 90% of those appointments. And if you schedule an appointment, you just you enter into the observation fields. I would like to have Luciano as my consultation attorney, and then they are going to make sure that I attend your consultation. But you're right. Like, there are no available spots for this week anymore. All right. But listen, we are here together, right? Like, I mean, we still have half an hour. So if you want to ask questions, you are welcome to do so, Fly Prince. Tio Shashin. All right. I'm pronouncing it as it was Portuguese, right? Tio Shashin. Hi, is the 1,500 US dollars per month enough to live well? To Shashin, not everywhere for sure. Okay, like, I mean, if you're gonna be in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, like, I mean, you can make a living, right? But that's not like a great budget, at least like for major cities like São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro. Florianópolis is somewhat, more on the expensive side as well. However, with 1,500, if you go like to the northeast of Brazil, or if you go to the north of Brazil, that's typically, or even like more in the countryside, like to the west, center west of Brazil, 1,500 US dollars is going to represent a much better budget, right? So, Tio Shashin, as long as you are smart about your location, yes, you can make 1,500 work really well. All right. We have something very interesting and recurring here at the firm. We have a lot of military personnel from the United States who will relocate to Brazil after retirement. And they are typically gonna have, like I'm not talking about specific light, I'm just talking, very broadly. They could be making, some people are gonna make 2,500, some people are gonna make $3,000, some people are gonna make $4,000. Now, if you think about those numbers, for sure they are not gonna be enough for you to live in a place like New York City, or I don't know, like most cities in California, right? Now, those amounts, they are gonna be great. They're gonna be really, really good for Brazil. Okay, so it's this is a concept that you may see in other channels, particularly those related to nomad living. They call it like geo arbitrage, right? Meaning that you're making your money in a certain country and you're spending your money in a different country. So you make money in a country in which money is more abundant, and then you're going to spend the money in another country. Okay. Now, Brazil is not really the cheapest country around, but when you compare, right, when you compare to the United States, I don't know, to the UK, right, to France, certainly we are going to represent a better deal for your money. Ford, how recent does a police check certificate need to be to qualify for a retirement visa application? So there is a very specific number, Ford, for that, and the number is 90 days. Okay, so the expectation is 90 days. And if you are in the United States, a challenge you typically face is how long it takes for you to secure the apostille for the FBI background check, right? So in the United States, to secure the FBI background check it is somewhat easy, right? Like in most states, you're going to be able to use private service providers to get your FBI background check issued, but the FBI background check by itself is not enough. You're going to need an apostille on top of it. And for a federal document, the apostille is typically issued by the Department of State, which happens to be in Washington, D.C. And whenever they are processing the correct way, and I can expand more on that, it's going to take then, about 40 days, right? Like 40 days just for the process. So we're not talking about the shipping time, right? Like they should ship, like this should be used on a hard copy fashion. So, after they process this thing, they still need to ship this stuff to you, right? So we have some routines to help us expedite the whole journey for the FBI background check. But the challenge over here, if you think it is true, is that you have 90 days to present the document, and basically you're gonna be spending almost like 2 months, just like in the processing stage, right? So you really needed to time this thing well to make it work. Something even more challenging, Biford, that we go through a lot here at the firm is when people are applying, from Brazil, right? So let's say if you are in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and you're going to apply for the retirement, and then if you are in Brazil, it's not a retirement visa, it's going to be retirement residency, right? If something is issued abroad, again, the United States, Europe, through a Brazilian consulate, we're going to call it a visa. And then if you are applying while in Brazil, you never say visa because there are no visas being issued within Brazil. In this case, it's going to be retirement residency in Brazil, okay? And so when we have clients in Brazil applying for the retirement residency, this is really challenging because they're physically in Brazil. And guess what? There are no service providers to collect your fingerprints, right? So what we do, like we actually ship like the FBI cards, the official cards from the FBI, we ship from the United States. We have in Rio de Janeiro, we have in Brasilia, and we have in São Paulo. And then when you are physically in Brazil working with us, you either gonna come to our office or we're gonna ship you the form, right? You're gonna, get your fingerprints on it. Then we're gonna let you know how to, mail this card to the FBI. Once the FBI receives your card in the US, they're gonna process. They're gonna issue your report on a PDF format, and they're gonna send it to you by email, not physically, right? And after that, then let's say you get the report through the PDF, we're going to send it to our partner in Washington, D.C. And from Washington, D.C., they are going to print out the document, get an apostille through the Department of State. And after this is completed, typically they're going to send this to us in Dallas. And then in Dallas, once we have a certain number of documents, then we're going to ship a batch back to Brazil. Now, imagine all of that with a 90-day deadline, right? Like, I think you can tell how challenging this is. All right, we have Maya Soleo. Welcome, Maya. Hi, my mother and I would like to move to São Paulo. She qualifies for a retirement visa, but my social security income is only 1,300, so I do not. I receive social security income for depression, and I am 54 years old. All right, Maya, let's talk about the requirements, okay? So there are no requirements in terms of age. We have a bunch of clients approved in their 30s, and our all-time record was a gentleman, a veteran, who was approved in his 20s, okay? So forget about age. Now, there is a firm requirement that you do have $2,000 in terms of retirement income, okay? Now, while most of this income should be traditional, at least a part of your amount could be less than $2,000, right? So let's say if you're getting 1,300 in Social Security, most of your 2,000 would be, formal retirement income, and you could supplement the 1,300 with something that's not necessarily traditional social security. And it could be, for instance, a rental property, right? So if you have an investment, a rental property generating something like, 700 US dollars, then you're going to have the 13 from the social security plus the 700 getting you to the $2,000. All right. So you can use this strategy. Now, again, no concerns in terms of age, Maya. All right. Aaron, yes, it is tax season. Yeah, tax season. Yes, we've been planning to develop a tax unit here at the firm for a while. We've been postponing, because of a very substantial change that we're going to have in the tax code. There was actually a change in law like last year and the year before. But now we're going to have the implementation of those tax changes in this upcoming couple of years, right? We don't know exactly how this is going to work, but we can tell it's going to change anyhow, right? The idea here is that taxation is going to be a bit more simple than it is today, hopefully a little bit more rational, but let's see how it works. James Rochas, I wonder if the Brazilian tax office really checks if the digital nomad in Brazil pay tax or not. I know some who don't pay taxes. James, I'm not surprised, all right? Like, I mean, that could be very well the case. And I would say everyone is different when it comes to risk, right? So while some people are going to take the risk and see how it works, others, they are going to be pretty firm on, like paying their taxes. All right. Now, if they do check or not, very difficult to say, particularly when it comes to, enforcement, audits, the typical concern that people have, like they are not going to disclose enough information for people to assess if they're going to be able to catch you or not. And on top of that, now we have AI. Okay, so I would say, maybe 10 years ago, I think it would probably be right, like they wouldn't be able to check. But nowadays, because everything is connected, to computers, and it's so easy to develop new systems and new routines, right, to catch text cheaters. Like, I mean, I would certainly not recommend anyone to take the chance. Tio Shashin, awesome. All right, Tio Shashin. Aaron, in Campinas, São Paulo, if you own a $50,000 condo, you can live comfortably on less than $1,000 a month. All right, Aaron. Yes. In Brazil and the state of São Paulo, or I would say pretty much anywhere in Brazil, housing is going to represent a major share of your costs, right? So, like you said, if you own the condo, it means you're not going to be paying rental, and whatever money you have, you would probably spend on groceries, on like smaller things that you need to buy, to have a decent living, right? Now, this is very personal, all right, Aaron. I would agree, with $1,000 a month, nobody is gonna be, facing any calorie deficit, if you will. You're gonna be, eating and doing stuff. But we also have a bunch of clients, right, who would need, a substantially higher amount in their opinions, just to live a very reasonable life, and not talking about luxury, right? So different standards, right? And I remember there was a live stream, Aaron. I'm not sure if you were in that live stream, right? Like, I mean, in São Paulo, there are some gyms that they're gonna charge you just for the monthly membership, $500, right? So there are gyms in São Paulo, again, that just the membership you're gonna be paying $500. They're super, high end. They are not representative of the average standard, but just sharing, so you know that there are different realities, right? Like in terms of expectation and standards of living. Maya, I meant to add that it is possible for family reunification since I'm over 24 years old. I have no other income and I am dependent upon her income. We live together. Maya, in this case, is not going to be a straight case, right? Like, I mean, for you to apply as a child, you should be either younger than 18 years old or older than 18 years old and be in college, right? So this is the standard. This is the standard for someone who's going to apply under the family unification as a child, right? Now, if you're gonna go, beyond that, meaning, you are older, right? Like if you're 24 years old, then you probably will need to give something very convincing and reasonable for the Brazilian immigration to open an exception for you, because this is certainly not the rule. Matt Gaines, can someone obtain their CPF with just a tourist visa while visiting Brazil? Yes, Matt, that's absolutely correct. You can even apply without a tourist visa, right? So let's say if you apply from the United States, you can basically just go to a consulate, and then at the consulate, they would get you the CPF even before you get something more meaningful in terms of a visa, right? And nowadays, we also have a partner firm who is working on a system for you to apply remotely for the CPF, Matt. If this is of your interest, you can basically just send an email to us, and I'm sure you have like our email address, but just sharing over here again, right? You can just say, and you can talk to Justin, right? Justin, she's the one who typically handles like the quotes and ask for the CPF system. Okay, and the fee for this particular service, if I'm not mistaken, right, because it's a separate entity, they are charging 275 US dollars. All right. Maya, okay, thank you. Is it really possible to enter Brazil over several years consecutive on only a tourist visa with extensions as long as you follow the dates and don't overstay? Maya, Brazil, is not nearly as picky as the United States and other countries in Europe. Like Brazil is much more, open arms and flexible in terms of accommodating foreign citizens, right? So typically, yes, if you have a tourist visa, if you're not overstaying, if you're following the rules, right? Like if you're not getting in trouble, chances are you're gonna be able to come and go. Now the extensions, that's something that is never really guaranteed, and it's a kind of a pain in the neck for you to secure. You need to schedule an appointment, pay fees in a certain bank. You need to gather a boatload of documents, right? And at the end of the day, the police federal officer, they still have the final say, right? So I don't know, like if they don't like you, maybe they're not gonna give you the extension, right? That's pretty typical in immigration. Like immigration, you never have like a sure right. You have more like an expectation or another perspective. Some people say that this is a privilege, right? Like I mean, they may choose to give you or not. All right, Maya. But listen, if you're just planning to stay half a year, the tourist visa slash extension, it's a really good way for you to enjoy Brazil, as long as you understand that nothing in immigration is guaranteed, right? So I'm telling you that this could work for some people, but I'm not telling you that this is going to work for sure. Just to be on the safe side in terms of what I'm telling you guys. All right, general principle. You mentioned changes to the tax code. Any chances Brazil gets more friendly tax policies? Not report all assets, worldwide income. Zero chance. General principle. That's not the case. All right, like the changes, they are more like to simplify the dynamics of assessing taxes and charging taxes, not to give you people any break, right? Like I mean, unfortunately, that's common across the board. You can think about the United States, you can think about Europe, right? Like taxes, they never typically, right? Like, I mean, it looks like in the US recently, I mean, there was some level of tax break, but typically taxes, they always go up, right? Because what happens is like people get accustomed to a certain level, and then later on, the government starts to push up and up and up. So, zero chance, general principle, unfortunately, that taxes would get any more friendly. All right, that's very unfortunate, but that's just a reality. Okay. Before, would my UK state pension be taxed in Brazil if I obtain retirement residency? Yes, Before. Any money that you get will be taxed. All right, there is no, just like I was telling general principle, there is no, exclusions. There is no friendly policies when it comes to taxation in Brazil. Now, for the retirement source, if I'm not mistaken, there is like a preferred lower tax bracket, right? And for foreign citizens, typically the tax bracket is gonna get up to 27.5%. But for retirement, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like again, it's coming like from the top of my head. I'm not checking any sources here. I think it is gonna be a straight 15%. which in my opinion is pretty generous, right? Like, I mean, 15% tax bracket, not bad at all. Okay. It could be much worse. All right, let me see what else. We have about 20 viewers as we speak. I would appreciate if you guys could take a moment to like our live stream. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to be updated on new content. We're producing a lot of new content, just on Florianopolis alone. I think we have over 10 videos being published that should be available later in January, right? Like, so if you're curious about Florianopolis, about Santa Catarina, about other places in Brazil, subscribe to our channel so you can be, on the loop for when this content becomes available. Let me see what else we have. It looks like we don't have any other open questions or comments. Let me know if I missed anything. Sometimes I miss is not on purpose, right? It's just because I'm juggling here in terms of the live stream, reading the comments. So if I skip some, just come back and say, listen, just repeat your question, and I will certainly address the topic of your interest. Okay. All right. Let me see something from our backlog of questions. All right. So, yeah, I'm just gonna, take the main bit here and explain to you guys instead of reading everything. And the question goes like this: listen, when I applied for the digital nomad visa, abroad through a consulate, it was super easy. Now I'm trying to renew the visa through the Brazilian Federal Police because naturally there are no Brazilian consulates inside of Brazil, right? And now this person is trying to renew at the Polícia Federal, and the Polícia Federal keeps telling them that he cannot renew at the Polícia Federal. Okay, so the shock here, the new piece of information that this person is getting is that when you apply abroad, the consulate is actually gonna file your application. You're still gonna need to provide every single piece of compliant document. You're gonna need, to pay a fee. You're gonna need to, eventually meet at the consulate for an appointment. But the filing, guess what, is done by the consulate. Now, this is for the person to get the visa. Once they are in Brazil, they register, right? They register at Brazilian Federal Police so they can get the resident card, right? And after the resident card is secured, you're going to have about 1 year of stay in Brazil. And before this 1 year expires, what do you need to do? You need to renew the digital nomad, right? And to renew the digital nomad, you're not going to have the consulate anymore. And the Brazilian Federal Police, they could not care less about you filing the application. So you're going to need to file this application by yourself, on your own, meaning that nobody is going to be helping you, proceed through the application, answering, I don't know, guessing 30, 40, 50 different fields. In addition, to figure out which documents you're going to need to refresh and how to present them in a fully compliant manner, right? And some people, they get it right from the bat. They say, well, you know what? Like, I mean, I don't want to become an expert on digital nomad renewal, and they're going to hire a professional service. Other people, unfortunately, they're going to try to resolve that by themselves, through learning, through attempts. And some of them, they are going to succeed. Many of them, they are not going to succeed. And as a result, some people are going to be, chasing us like at the last minute because now, their allowed time in Brazil is expiring and they don't know how to fire, right? They tried to do something, but this something hasn't worked. And now they need urgent help, right? And, so just sharing here this kind of very common challenge that we see going on because again the consulate kind of gives them a sense that it should be really easy for you to secure the residency in Brazil, and that's not exactly how it works. All right, Flying Prince, thanks, got your calendar. Between save time, I got my CPF appointment at the Brazilian embassy. First week of next month we will receive a green light, present supporting documents for legalization to help us save time. Yeah, so absolutely, Fly Prince. Yes, consulates and embassies, right? Like the Brazilian consulates and embassies, they are fully capable of issuing a CPF, right? Some of them they are going to accept an application remote. Some of them they are going to want for you to show up in person, right? So it really depends on the consulate or embassy. And now more a curiosity about embassy. Even when you're dealing with an embassy, right? Within the embassy, they are going to have a consular arm, right? So if you're going to the embassy of Brazil in Abu Dhabi, it's not actually. I mean, if you are really technical about, it's not going to be the embassy who's going to be dealing with stuff like the CPF and the visas. It's going to be the consular arm within the embassy, okay? Because these are typically consular services. All right. Now, in terms of like scheduling a consultation, participating in our like live streams, you are welcome to do so, Flying Breeze, at any time. All right, let's take a look at something else. Well, we actually have one more participation here. Mahogino. Hello, sir. I'm from Benin, a small country located in West Africa. I am a remote worker and I would like to know if I'm eligible for the remote work visa in Brazil. All right. So typically, the digital nomad track is made available like for countries like the United States and countries in Europe and like other countries with a higher economic output, if you will. Okay, typically for Africa, what we see is that the digital nomad is not going to be available, or if it is available, they are going to give people a really hard time to apply. Okay, so in terms of the eligibility is typically the same across the board, right? Like they are not going to change the digital nomad eligibility depending on your country of origin. It is basically the 1,500 US dollars a month as income. You need to be able to perform your work remotely. You need a clean background check, right? And you also need an apostilled birth certificate showing your parents' names. There are other requirements, but those that I just told you, they are the main ones when it comes to the eligibility. Okay, now this said, I can tell you, like there is an unwritten policy from the Brazilian government to make it difficult for people from developing countries to secure the digital nomad visa. Okay, so if I had it to guess, I would say it is going to be difficult for you to secure. But first step would be to get in touch with the consulate in charge or the embassy, right? For smaller countries, typically Brazil is going to have an embassy in a country, in a major country in the area. That's going to be serving not only this major country, but smaller countries around, right? So in your case, if I had it to guess, I would guess there is a Brazilian embassy in charge of Benin, and I would, get in touch with them and first thing to ask if they have the digital nomad visa available. If they have it, you can always apply, even if it is like an uphill battle. You can still apply and see the results you get. Okay. I hope that was helpful. All right, let's take another look at the backlog. All right, this is a interesting question, and I discussed a lot yesterday, right? Like I had a consultation yesterday with a client. I'm not going to share the specifics, but we did spend, a good amount of time discussing about the Brazilian União Estável. Okay, for those of you who don't know, União Estável, it could be similar to like a civil union, and it could also be similar to the common law marriage, right? So why they could be similar to such different things? Because the common law marriage is typical of when you don't have a paperwork, right? So let's say if you start to live with someone and you're not like under any type of agreement, after a while, the state is going to recognize the relationship to protect the partners. That's the common law marriage. That's how it's called in most states in the United States, common law marriage. The second type is when you sign a piece of paper, but this piece of paper is not marriage, right? This piece of paper in many US states is going to be called a civil union, right? And in Brazil, unfortunately, we're going to use the same name for both things. So if I go to a cartório, to a registry, and I say, I want to do a união estável, they are going to get us a deed. They're going to get you a deed for the união estável, right? And because there is a document, in my understanding, we're talking about something very similar to the civil union. Okay. Now, let's say if you're living with a partner and you're not getting any paperwork to regulate your relationship, like you're not signing any document, you're just living together, and life goes on, and then 3 years down the line, the relationship ends. Okay, and then eventually, one of the partners, let's say the Brazilian party, could file a claim for união estável, right? And then the judge, looking back or looking at the facts specific to your relationship during those years, is going to assess if there was união estável or not. So you see, união estável could be for both documented união estável relationships, or it could be for just fact-based relationships. Okay, and what really catches, like for instance, let's say unaware about the challenges of união estável in Brazil, is that nowadays there is pretty much no requirement that the parties are living together, right? Like most people, they say, well, you know what, as long as we're not living together, we're fine. Or maybe you're living together and you're going to think, well, as long as I'm living together just for a year, like we're fine, right? And nowadays, there is really no single requirement that is going to be a must for a union estável to be found. The dynamic here is going to be a more like a 360 degree understanding of the relationship and a decision by the judge, right? So in my experience, I already saw união estável for less than a year. And I also saw união estável with no, common address for the partners. All right, so really important for you to keep that in mind. People, sometimes they come to Brazil. In Brazil, naturally, right? Like Brazilians are very receptive, very warming, and then people, start to develop relationships without awareness of the consequences of getting into a relationship. Okay, and by the way, from my perspective, there is nothing wrong with it. There is nothing wrong with getting into the relationship, and there is nothing wrong with a judge finding a union estável there, right? Like, because if you're living, I don't know, with a person for 4 years, in my head, is kind of similar to a marriage, right? And I understand some people, they're going to marry because they want the upside of the relationship, and they don't want the downside of the relationship, and that's not how things should work, in my opinion, right? So I do like the união estável. Let's say not 100%, but most of the união estável, it does make sense in my head. But what I don't like is this lack of awareness of foreign citizens, right? Because one thing is for you to know the rules, like from the get-go. Another thing is for you to learn it down the line, when you can no longer revert what you did, right? But that's why we're here. That's why we have this live stream, to share helpful knowledge with you guys. Okay, and I hope this was helpful. It was a really interesting live stream session. Remember, we're going to have our next live stream next week. It is already in our channel. So if you are, up to the challenge, come and join us on January the 21st. Is going to be the same time. It's going to be 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Write down your points of interest so we can discuss here live. I hope you guys stay well and have a blessed rest of your day.